Thank you, Lloyd. My name is Paige Medill, and today I'm really thrilled to be speaking with Nate about the Constitutional Convention. So, before we get started and really discuss the convention, could you tell me a little bit about your background and what motivated you to represent your community as a delegate?
Yeah, cool. And thank you so much, Paige, for having me, and thank you, Lloyd, for setting this up. Um, what a week! I think I'm still recovering. Yeah, bit of jet lag, bit of exhaustion, but yeah, that was awesome, and we'll get into that. About me, I'm a school teacher, so I've been working in schools for 10 years now in math, science, phys ed, and health. And across my journey had to find different ways of engaging with students and different ways of engaging with the local community and becoming an advocate for those people in many cases as well. In my experience in the web3 space, I started out as a just a normal investor coming in, what sort of happens with if you buy a token, price go up, all that sort of stuff, but then found there was so much more behind it. Really found that places like Cardano are really building so many things that can change the world, like a new financial system, a new governance system, a new way of doing things, a new way of making sure people's voices are heard. Excuse me, and yeah, just such a complete way of like a visionary revolution to the way that life could be done. Um, so in my experience, I was a part of a community. That community got rugged. I helped take over like rebuild that community and take over that project. Then we went about a whole transformative era of rebranding that project, producing something brand new. And I felt because I'd been on such a roller coaster of a journey in my time in the space, from being a investor to being a community member to having the highs and lows of what goes around with being a part of a community, especially when it gets rug pulled, to reforming it with community members to build back up. It truly put me in a position that I thought I could be a really good advocate for the Cardano community in a place like a constitution convention. And then as a school teacher, I'm such a passionate educator that I figured if I could be a part of an event like this, I could really help to bring that information back to the community, and produce as many educational resources as possible.
Great. It is so great to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, I'm sure you have so many, but if you can pick one, do you have a most memorable moment from the convention? And did it change or shape how you understand collaborative governance?
Oh, this is a tough one because it was a week of highlights. I've explained it to a
Yes.
number of people since getting back that who would have thought you could get like 150 people to go sit in a room for 8 to 10 hours a day talking about governance and writing a constitution, and have every single one of them sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for their moment to come and get involved and to step up and share their thoughts and opinions. Um, I think one of the highlights, just because of how it was just a beautiful piece of like simplicity that managed to alleviate so much tension. And I point to, I believe it was the Thursday, so the second last day of the convention. There was a lot of tension and a lot of passion from people around some certain wording that was in the Constitution. In particular, it was the word equitable. Um, and there was a lot of debate around this. And I think there was a lot of other underlying things that people wanted to have a chance to express. And a lot of that passion was being channeled into this word and making sure that we had this word right and giving everyone the right representation. And we went into the first session after discussing it all night, the night before, discussing it at breakfast, amongst other things, but this was just one particular point of contention. And then we're in the room, and you could feel everyone was a little bit uneasy and a little bit awkward and a bit edgy. And then we finally got to the first break, and there was just people like climbing over chairs, climbing over desks to get into circles, to get into huddles, to communicate and talk about like this is what I think about like this word or this particular part of the Constitution. And we got back from the break, and Cynthia had put up on the screen like some definitions for what equal means, what equitable means, what fairly means, and what impartial means. And we're all sort of looking at it going, oh, which word do we want? And Nori, who was in the crowd, absolute legend, he sort of put his hand up. He was like, guys, those four definitions are basically the same thing. What if we take the definition of those words, because they all pretty much had the same one, and include that in the text? And everyone just sort of went, ah. And the whole room's tension just dropped. And all of a sudden it was like, you sort of had like chills because it was like such a just calming moment. And then all of a sudden, the rest of the conversations around what people were not necessarily in the happiest place with just flowed out so much easier because it was like, I guess, a bit of acupuncture for the room that the tension was just immediately gone. And then people's minds opened up, the communication started flowing so much easier. And by the end of that next session, we'd managed to knock out about 5 or 6 key points of conversation, convert them, add bits, take out bits. And all of a sudden, we went from a room where maybe we would have struggled to get that 51% consensus to, as people saw on voting day, 95% consensus. And I think that was a real tipping point that helped to enable people to get that tension out and really get to a place where they were happy with a minimal viable constitution.
Absolutely. Great answer. During the convention, delegates achieved a, well, I would say remarkable consensus on multiple issues. Um, this is another one where I imagine it's quite tough, but would you be able to share a specific instance where you saw all of these perspectives come together effectively? And you touched on this a little bit now, actually.
So I think so that previous example touches on this a bit, but I'll try and give you another one. And I think another one that was kind of interesting is around the definitions being included in the text. So on day one, we had a discussion, and as a result of that discussion, a list of, I think it was about 20 or 24 words that the Cardano Foundation had put forward ended up being added as an appendix to the Constitution. And people were like, "Oh, this is great. It's going to make it a lot easier. That way, my grandma can understand. She can, like, there's a word she doesn't know, she can go look it up." But then that created a bit of contention as well. It's like, well, this document isn't for my grandma. Like, how many people have ever actually read their own country's constitution, let alone coming into an investment setting and a digital community setting are going to go and read the constitution? So, well, this thing's actually for the constitutional committee and the everyone to just understand, kind of like a rule book of how we should play in this playground of Cardano. So people were like, "Oh, it needs to be out." People were like, "It needs to be in." And again, it was one of these things that people don't see, even if they were watching the live stream. That would wake up, would be going. I met with Simon Malik and Sarah Ewan, and we're going for a run every morning, or I might be going to the gym or wherever it was, and people were having conversations about governance. Like, this is why we can't have the definitions. This is why we need the definitions. You'd get back to the hotel, and all of a sudden you'd go sit and have breakfast, and you'd be with a bunch of different people again. You get on the bus, you'd be sitting with a bunch of different people again, and it was just constantly, like, for 5 days straight, discussions, some more passionate than others,
Mhm.
about like why this thing needs to be written in a certain way, and can we be in a place where we're truly happy with the current state. So eventually there was a lot of, again, these little breakout groups where people, I think the definitions just can't be in the constitution, because if they are, it requires such a high threshold of governance action to change the definitions or to add or include new definitions as we see fit. So perhaps we just need to take them out of the document, and then we can get one of everyone's favorite words, a future work stream, to go and really truly work on these definitions, get them added as a supporting document that can still all be on chain, and it can still require an info action to edit them. But rather than actually having to change the whole constitution just to add a definition that we missed, it's a much simpler process and much cleaner. So yeah, being a part of like those conversations, I think even more important than the example, just the fact that people were in this beautiful, like beautiful country, beautiful city, Buenos Aires, and rather than going out sightseeing, we're literally sitting in groups, like being crazy people, talking about governance constantly. So from I think day one officially of the convention was Tuesday. We were all in a room, sitting as a crowd of united people, with a common passion and a common goal of making a document that keeps Cardano safe and prosperous, right through to that Thursday where we did the on-chain voting, and Friday, obviously, the signing ceremony. It's nuts. Where do you find that 150 or 200, how many people it was, that are willing to do that? It was crazy, but it's truly special to be a part of.
Absolutely. That sounds so special, and that's a great answer. Kind of going along with that, seems like you were in constant communication with everyone all the time, but how did you manage to maintain specifically communication with your fellow delegates and the constituent community throughout the convention? And what sort of insights did they provide with you for you?
Yeah, it was a challenge because you're for me, being from Perth, Western Australia, being in Buenos Aires, Argentina, I was 12 hours opposite to my constituents.
Yes.
So some parts of the day where I might have wanted some feedback from them, we're talking about 1 o'clock in the morning if it was like 1 p.m. in Buenos Aires. So there was challenges around that, and it was great seeing how everyone was approaching it. We had people that had Discord channels set up, people had Telegram groups set up, people had like a live notes or like a OneNote type document where their constituents could be contributing to that live and bouncing back feedback. And I was sat next to Angie the whole time, and she was frantically taking notes, and then I'd see her off converting all of her notes into messages so she could come back and represent the whole community that she was representing. um, yeah, it was a remarkable feat of technology, demonstrating just what capacity it has to bring the whole world together. Because if we were trying to do this in any other sort of situation where maybe we couldn't have Wi-Fi access or something like that, it would have been a much more locked down, tighter room. It would have been so much more difficult, in terms of relaying back to our constituents. But hey, this is the beauty of the age that we live in, right? It doesn't matter where you are in the world, you could have a say in shaping governance and shaping the way that Cardano moves forward. When it comes to the even having delegates sitting in a room in Buenos Aires versus delegates sitting in a room in Nairobi was another interesting challenge. But speaking with the guys in Nairobi, it was actually like I felt like we had an incredibly intimate time just with the delegates and alternates in Argentina. But then, because their group was smaller, they had that even again, where they could be having a conversation with all these people that you've never met before. You might never have had the opportunity. All of a sudden, you're there. You're just talking. There's nothing you'd rather be doing than having a conversation, which is crazy to say, about governance. Um, and yeah, so even we were just so fortunate that they were in a great place in Nairobi where the connectivity was on point for, I think, 98% of the time. Everyone in that room had their chance to put their hand up and have their voices heard. And the same thing goes, there was a enormous amount of respect for people in the room. Someone could stand up, say their piece, and regardless of how much you might have like polar disagreed to what they were saying, everyone give them a round of applause for actually standing up, having the courage to represent their community and have their voices heard. And then being like on the ground in BA, it was nuts. Like there's people like executives from IOG, CF, Emergo, some of the earliest developers in the Cardano space were there. That like being from Perth, Western Australia, when am I ever going to have a chance to pick their brain? So being able to do that on the ground, have a conversation, sit and have a coffee. If we had 5 minutes after to grab a beer and sit down and have a chat with these guys, it was. I came back with no voice because I was just that excited, talking to everyone, making 200. Or I say 150. I reckon there's probably closer to 200 people. So making 200 new friends that are like-minded and passionate, and that just want to see this chain, this ecosystem succeed.
Wow, yeah, that is really beautiful. Um, the convention implemented um, really innovative consensus building techniques, like temperature checks. Would you say that these methods influenced the quality of discussion or how decisions were made? What was the general, I guess, consensus surrounding these sorts of initiatives?
Yeah, they were great, to be honest, and I laugh just because it immediately makes me think of the memes that Charles was putting up during the convention. Like we're all sitting there having such serious conversations, and then you get a notification Charles has posted, and it's a yeah. If anyone missed it, go check out Charles' Twitter. Um, but and it was like in some ways like it was obviously something that was quite memeable because it was like we discussed something, that can we get a temperature check? We discussed something, can we get a temperature check? And it just kept happening. And it was even just interesting how that flow went from having signs that had yes on one side and no on the other to the next day all of a sudden having two signs, one that clearly said yes both sides and the other one saying no, to make sure that the streaming audience could see and understand what was happening. And um, the beauty of it was that we could get quick feedback of where everyone in the room was. The challenge of it was communicating to a room of people that some are native English speakers, some English as a second language, or maybe a third or a fourth language. And at times it could have been difficult for some of them, although they can have a conversation with you in English, to have someone stand at the front of the room, run through an explanation of something that may or may not have been on the screen, and then have to be able to interpret that, convert it into language in your brain that you actually understand, and then be able to give feedback. At times it seems to get a little bit quick, which was the nature of it because the temperature checks are designed to be quick. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges, I think. Some people were like, holy crap, what has happened? And even at times I know myself, like I claim to be a native English speaker, but people can hear me talking now. They know I speak Australian English. It's a bit of a slang broken English. Um, like even at times I was certainly being challenged. It was like, okay, let's make sure I've got enough caffeine to keep the brain fully juiced up for when these moments are happening. So I can imagine how challenging it was. And I even had a chat with some of the people, say from Japan or South Korea, that English isn't the language they're speaking every day. And they did express that it was challenging. But at the same time, those temperature checks, they weren't they weren't an on-chain vote. So if they didn't get it, they were like, oh, I can put up my yes, I can put up my no. And if you're not 100% confident with either one, they were able to have a conversation with those people around them where they could. So it was really cool. And yeah, having the paddles was just it was a good way of accelerating some of the conversation that didn't have to be bogged down on so much. But obviously there was some challenges.
Absolutely. And definitely memeable,
Yeah.
but so great to see. Looking back at the process, what would you say surprised you most about working with delegates from different cultural and geographic backgrounds?
Oh, what surprised me the most? Um, I think the thing that was probably the most surprising is everyone's openness and willingness, regardless of who they were, regardless of what they've done, I guess like geographic location, financial situation, whatever you want to put it down to. Everyone was there so willing and so open to communicate and to share their experiences, share their thoughts and opinions. There was no ego in the room. There was passion. I will not deny that there was passion in the room, and there's people were more or less passionate about particular things. But the fact that we could have those moments in the breaks or at breakfast, before or after, where it might have been, to sit down and really just talk to each other on a one-to-one human level, regardless of what our background, like regardless of our background or our situation, and have these incredibly powerful, incredibly important conversations is just an experience that, like, I think I'm gonna say that you'll never get to do again, but I truly hope that's not the case because it was absolutely incredible. Like, there's a number of times I was sitting down with the South Korean delegation and Oscar as well, the ICC member, and just having conversations about, well, like, how is this affecting you? How are you interpreting this? How, like, what is your community thinking? And having a chance to break that down and bounce that back off the point of like where the Australian delegation are sitting, and then being able to go from that conversation, excuse me, from that conversation to another part of the room and speak to someone from Germany, and then go to another part and be speaking to someone from the United States. And ultimately be able to see that although there was some slight differences of opinion or some semantics around words from culture to culture, there was just a common belief and a common passion for the greater good of Cardano, but the greater good of the world. Charles said it, I think, in a number of his keynotes, just this ability to have a better money system, the ability to have a better governance system, to give more people a voice, no matter where they are around the world, and all of those underlying values and beliefs that we have for while we're here. Um, it was yeah, no matter where the people were sitting around the world, that was the goal. And I don't know if I've ever seen a room of politicians where people could agree and have a conversation, even a passionate conversation where everyone else is actually listening rather than just shouting at each other. So that was a truly incredible thing to be able to see and be a part of. And I'll keep those memories with me for the rest of my life.
I love that. I really hope that we as a community are able to have more conventions that bring feelings like that. You've already touched on this a little bit, but would you be able to describe a challenge that you maybe encountered during the convention and how or if you worked with other delegates to overcome that challenge?
Ooh, so the biggest challenge, I think this is a tricky one because overall it was such a good experience that I think had been really well organized. And yeah, I guess in some ways having more time could have been good for that convention. But I think how much time can you really have when you've spent 2 years working on a process? And I think probably the biggest challenge was the language barrier or for some people in the room. Although a requirement to become a delegate was that you can speak and understand and participate. I guess in some cases, as I described with the temperature checks, it could have did get a little bit challenging. And if we had maybe an extra day or two where we could go off into breakout rooms of smaller groups with less time pressure and be able to give everyone a chance to speak, because if I guess in sometimes there was like louder voices in the room that were able to stand up with more confidence. I would have loved to be able to see some of those other delegates have that same confidence in their answers, that they could stand up and communicate those with the passion that they had, and when they were communicating them in the breaks or before or after convention sessions. So that was probably the biggest one. But like realistically, I think what would my solution to that have been? If we had an extra day or two, maybe we would have been going off, like we'd have a conversation in the bigger room, then we go into a breakout room in groups of maybe 10 or 15 where there's one or one person that will come back to the bigger room to share the thoughts, opinions, and consensus from those smaller groups. But we we're kind of doing that anyway. So, and the time pressure meant that the conversation was always on topic. So that was a really good part of that. So I don't know that I would actually change anything, but I'd say in terms of what was the biggest challenge, that was probably one that I guess I don't know. I like to give a voice to people that aren't being heard. That's part of what I do as a school teacher. That's part of what I do in my community. So by having those opportunities before and after each session, during breaks, wherever it might have been, I feel like I was able to do that anyway, like to help some people that may not have had the confidence or the English language. Like everyone was competent in English, so I don't want to underplay that, but I guess the confidence to stand up in that room and to help to share some of those thoughts and opinions for people that might not have been able to do that. But that also comes to the alternates, I guess, because regardless of what language background the alternates had in the room, in most cases they were not in a place where they had the opportunity to speak, because I guess the delegates were representing the alternates and the constituents. So bringing back even those conversations and bringing them back to the room was a very important part of what we had to do. So I think that sort of covers it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any specific aspects of the final constitution that make you particularly or especially proud? And why do you think they'll benefit the broader community?
Ooh, so these are big, audacious questions. Like they're quite. Actually, I don't know if audacious is the right word. They're big questions, right? And there's so much to it. I think the thing that I'm the most proud of and the most happy with is a point that Lloyd kept coming back to in the room. And he kept saying, with this document and with a lot of things in life, we don't need everyone to be 100% happy. And it took a 2-year process to get to a place where, no, not everyone's going to be 100% happy, but everyone's going to be happy at a level that their community has been heard, that their voice has been heard, that ultimately the Cardano ecosystem is going to be safe, protected, and set up in a way that it can continue to move forward, prosper, and become the world, or the network state that sets the standard for the entire world, whether it's in terms of money, governance, community, development, whatever it might be. And watching the ebbs and flows of where people were, it's like you could almost have a barometer on that person each day. Are they got like are they at a yes 100% or are they no 100%? Where are they sitting between it? And watching everyone slide across that scale of where they're sitting and where their thoughts are, where their feelings like do they feel like they're being heard, and following that journey and getting to a place where obviously 95% of people voted yes was absolutely incredible. It was so cool. Like you'd sort of be on the edge of your seat. Is this person going to say yes or no? They say yes. Then you look around the whole room and everyone's eyes have lit up. They've got the biggest smiles on their face. They're clapping. You see people with like tears rolling down their face the whole way through. Like, we did something that I don't think has been done, and if it has, it probably isn't done as much as it should be, where we had people from 50 countries come together, form consensus on something so important. There was no wars declared, there was no like fights, there was no although there was contention and there was passion, there was no disrespect. Like, how often could anyone ever say that they've been a part of something like that? And to see the constant joy, constant uplift in the room, particularly at those final stages, was truly incredible. Even when people stood up to say no, like I felt, I felt for Patrick when he stood up and he was the first person to say no, that he wasn't happy with the constitution. But everyone in the room gave him a massive round of applause because that was the support and the passion of the people in the room. He stood up to represent his constituents and his delegation, and he stuck to it. And he was authentic to the values of that group, and the whole room just understood and appreciated that. It wasn't about trying to like stranglehold or everyone into voting yes and have 100%. We wanted everyone to represent their constituencies with as much strength and passion as they could, and that's what we saw in the room. And ultimately, we saw a 95% yes vote. We saw a crazy amount of like happiness, like a big celebration, like flicking over to the screens to see Nairobi, where everyone was having like a dance off because there's just this overcoming of emotions and positivity and happiness that we were able to do something as a I guess as a protocol, as an ecosystem, as a community, and as like a global community, that I don't think you ever see happening anywhere else around the world.
Yeah. And on that note, as we look to the future, what advice would you give to other communities that are considering similar initiatives?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I think they people can look back at the process, look at what was good, what was bad. Where did the like community, even on Twitter, for example, see points of contention or that they were maybe not as content as they could have been, and learn from that. But ultimately, what we did over this 2-year period is give every single person a voice and a chance to be heard, a chance to be a part of this. And when you give everyone that chance to be heard and to yeah, sort of repeating myself. But when you give everyone a chance to be a part of something so important, um, there's I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Like be upset, disappointed when you know that you've had a chance across the full journey to shape this, to attend a workshop, to be a part of a constituency. So if other chains, other communities can learn from what happened here, where everyone was given a voice, everyone was given a chance to participate, they were given a chance to elect someone that represents their feelings, emotions, beliefs, and values, and to send them to 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 be in a room together that's so broad, so culturally diverse, and then all of those people to have such open minds and open hearts to hear different conversations, and understand where other people are coming from. Like, I think, find replicate the process, refine the process, make it even better. Definitely, there's like, upon review, I'm sure there's ways that, even the civics committee, even Charles would have done this differently from day one, like in small ways to increase the outcome. Like, if you really can, like 95% yes is pretty good. Um, yeah, I think, I don't know if I really gave any advice there, but I think if people watch and learn from what we did here and really follow that value system of giving everyone their opportunity, then ultimately they'll have a successful process too.
Thank you so much, Nate. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. I really enjoyed hearing your insights and learning from you, and I think the community will be really excited to hear from you as well.
Thank you so much for having me. And sorry if I was rambling or waffling on a bit. It's I know, once the passion starts to roll out, it starts to flow. Yeah, want to make sure I can communicate as much of the amazing stuff that happened at that convention, because it was a life changing and a highlight of my life for sure.
Absolutely. No, I think everything you've said has been amazing, and the community is going to be really excited to hear it. So thank you so much for coming on. For GM Cardano, I am Paige Medill.